Welcome to my fireside chat here with a very interesting person. It's Michel Bauwens originally from Belgium. And the reason why I asked him and he kindly agreed to come here on this recording is because, to my knowledge, or what is probably also known, at least in the public, he is the only person that didn't come from the cypherpunk or the cryptography mailing list community and the peer-to-peer computing community that was directly approached by Satoshi Nakamoto. And welcome, Michel. And I would like to ask you to give us maybe a little bit of an introduction to yourself, and then we get into the nuts and bolts of your Bitcoin interaction, which is actually quite interesting. So the floor is yours, Michel.
Right. Well, thank you, Jens. So yeah, as you said, I'm Belgian. I'm 67. I have 4 kids. I've been living 20 years in Thailand, in Chiang Mai, which is the world capital of digital nomads. And you catch me in a particular situation because I've just been in jail 3 days in the immigration jail, and I've been deported for like the wrong visa, basically,
Yeah,
host family. Um, and yeah, so let's put that on the side.
sorry to hear that you were there in that like very uncomfortable situation. I'm happy to hear that you got some support there from the community and so on. That's always great to hear. So, can you explain a little bit? So you were contacted in 2009, I think, by Satoshi. So what the public knows is that Satoshi had some kind of like not explained approach to your P2P Foundation where he registered and posted. That is known in the public. So can you give us a little bit like a background of this P2P Foundation and how you got aware of Satoshi Nakamoto? I suppose you didn't really know who that was at the time, right?
Uh, well, so the difference between, what you call the cypherpunk and P2P computing community and the P2P Foundation is that we apply peer-to-peer socially and not technologically. But the link is very easy, right? So if you have computers that can connect to each other without servers directly from peer to peer, then obviously the people who are behind these computers can do the same. And so then what you're creating is a capability for massive translocal self-organization. So that was our point of view. And also, I think politically, we're not so libertarian. We came more from the left the side of things rather than the libertarian side. Um, and so, I was aware of cypherpunk. I was following some of these debates. Um, but at the same time, we were kind of critical of some of the suppositions behind the whole, Bitcoin, blockchain, world. Now, I also have changed my position on those things, but I'm telling you how I was thinking 20 years ago, or what is it, 15 years ago, right? Um,
2009, actually,
and
beginning of
and so I
2009.
think the fact that Satoshi emailed me, so he emailed me about 3 times, and separately from that, he posted on our Ning forum. So that was
Ning is was your internet domain, right?
p2pfoundation.ning.com.
Yeah.
Right, that's where he kind of posted the white paper. But in a way, the fact that he emailed me also means that he knew me somehow, right? That he knew about the P2P Foundation, and that he felt the connection between the computing part of P2P and what we were doing. Otherwise, why would he, especially choose us to publish the white paper? Of course, I cannot prove this because he didn't say that much, but I think that's a fair assumption
Yeah,
that,
and I think
yeah.
like that's like with the evidence I collected, right? I mean, it's astonishing that we are not aware of any other outlet. I mean, other than the cypherpunk
Right.
kind of news groups and
Yeah.
so on, and code repositories, so which are more on the technical or cypherpunk cryptographer scene. I don't think he approached anybody else, at least as it hasn't been in the
Right.
public, right? So you were kind of the only kind of more like ideological outlet that he posted to. So
Right.
your assumption, even though we cannot have final proof, right, would make sense that he had a
Yeah.
certain mission that was going beyond purely exciting some computer nerds, let's say, right?
Right.
And so he, like, how did it go? Like, he approached you before he posted on the site, or after, or can you remember that? Or it's probably difficult. It's
Think
a
so,
long
but
time ago.
I can't remember exactly, but it was basically, I think it must have been before because it said, I'm posting this thing on Ning, and I would like you to look at the white paper, and I can also send you some bitcoins. And that was one of the great mistakes of my life, is that I replied something, but I didn't reply on the bitcoins. Uh,
Yeah,
and
and that's also unique, right? Because that was something that puzzled me. That I mean, he he had like some significant amounts of Bitcoin, and
yeah,
at some stage, I mean, he sent some Bitcoin. We know that to very select individuals, but mostly for trying transactions. So any
yeah,
donations in that sense, like he never said, okay, at least from the messages we have in the public, right? I'm not aware that
yeah,
he said, oh yeah, here's some free Bitcoin that you just have it. You know, it
yeah,
was
yeah,
mostly like, okay, here are some. He probably didn't fully do accounting that he gets all the money back, but he never
yeah,
really
yeah,
said, okay, here is so much Bitcoin I want to donate. He once said that get something, or there was another person who established in 2010 actually a faucet, right? So you could just solve a captcha or so, and you got a couple of free Bitcoin or something like that. But he actually always encouraged it, but he was like a little bit tight pocketed normally. At least
yeah,
that's what we get, you know. So that would also be in addition to you being running essentially the only organization outside that typical community that he approached,
yeah,
and also the only person that would be kind of offered free Bitcoin,
yeah,
because I
yeah.
guess you were not so much interested in the technical part. Am I right on that, or like?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I saw it as a technical experiment. I didn't see it immediately as this thing that would completely change the world. I was open-minded to it, but I saw it as an experiment. And it took me, I don't know how long it took me, but so when I switched, it was, and I'm not a technical person, right? So I'm looking at this as an anthropologist, historian, sociology point of view, is that this is the first socially sovereign currency that is scaling effectively, right? So that's for me very important. We have private currencies that are, like by corporations, like air miles, for example, they're a form of money, if you like. You have fiat money by the nation states. Then you have lots of complementary currencies, but they don't work very well, and they are local and they don't scale very well. And so for me, this was the first one that was from a non-state, non-private community that was trusted because of its protocol. But it's the trust of the people in the protocol that interests me, not the protocol itself, right? Because I'm not in the technical part.
But I
But
mean,
that
in
was the big thing for me, that
2009,
he was success, that he had a certain success in making that work. So that was like, oh wow, this is something that is gonna, part of the peer-to-peer revolution. It took me maybe a few months to recognize it, but I didn't recognize it right away when he wrote to me. I thought, okay, this is an interesting experiment. That was
yeah,
my
but I
first
mean,
reaction.
we are talking about he approached you at least the postings on the peer-to-peer kind of forum were in February 2009. right? So that
Yeah.
was just a few weeks after he launched the
Yeah.
blockchain,
Very
and then a
early.
few
Yeah.
months
Nobody else was talking
after,
about it
right?
at that
So
time, you know?
there was probably just a handful of people that we're aware of.
Yeah.
There were a couple of miners, but it's probably two hands would be enough, to count them.
Yeah.
And most of them were probably just also as you seeing as a technical toy to play around with a little bit for pure
Yeah.
interest. But I think at the time, maybe Satoshi was the only one who um, who had some sort of belief that it would take off, right? And I
Yeah.
mean, of course, it could have been buried very quickly, if there hadn't
Yeah.
been so the other thing is, so he had your email address, or did he always contact you through the forum?
No, no, he had my email address, which is still the same, Michel Sub 2004 at gmail.com.
Okay. So
Um,
so you have, but you don't think that, of course, not as Satoshi, but that you had a prior interaction with him online, of course, not as Satoshi
no,
Nakamoto, but that he was,
if I did, it was not on that name. So
yeah,
I have no idea who it was. I'm sorry.
yeah, of course. And
And, for me, not being in the Bitcoin, enthusiasm from the beginning, I wasn't in awe either. I thought this is an interesting technical guy doing an interesting technical experiment. I didn't lose my sleep about it. I didn't have that
yeah.
belief that a lot of people had very early on. I was interested and open-minded, but I didn't have like, and I had issues with Bitcoin, like the energy. You know, I was concerned about some of these issues that around how it was produced, about the inequality of the Bitcoin holdings. Because people critique the fiat system, but Bitcoin is even more unequal in its distribution than fiat money. So, from a kind of egalitarian point of view, I wasn't all like enthusiastic about it. But gradually I changed on this, and the key point for me to change was Julian Assange, right? Where this was probably the first one that I know of. Maybe there were the people before, but that I realized, damn, now they're debanking people, right? And so if you're an activist and they're debanking you, and that happened to me in 2018, I was debanked and de-PayPal. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you even survive? How do you even get your money if people want to pay you, right? So, so with Julian Assange, and I think it was called Assange DAO, then I realized this is a tool, a vital tool, for survival of dissent and free speech. If you don't have Bitcoin and the nation states are moving to a surveillance ideology and a repressive ideology, then it becomes a vital tool, whether you like it or not. It's like US dollars, whether you like it or not. If you have no money, you starve, right? So this is the same with Bitcoin. Doesn't mean I was wildly enthusiastic about it, but I said this is a tool for activists as well. If we want to preserve free speech and get funding for people who are dissenters, then things like and then the other aspect that changed my mind was it's programmable, right? So we can make much more intelligent currencies. Again, not being a libertarian, I don't believe in the free market in the absolute. I think markets are fine, but they have to be embedded in some regulations that protect people and environments. And so the fact that cryptocurrencies are programmable, right? Like Fishcoin that can take into account the number of fish that need to be reproduced. So I thought this is very interesting, right? This
So that
is
was more on blockchain, right? Because I mean, the programmability of
yeah, yeah.
Bitcoin
So the
is
link
a little bit.
between the Bitcoin as the first socially sovereign currency that is globally scalable and the blockchain as the first universal ledger, right? Before that, we only had private ledger, whether they're corporate or nation state. They only see the world in terms of their own profit.
And
Once
do
you
you
have a
think,
universal ledger, you have a ecosystem of accounting. So now you can see the impact that you have on the ecosystem, whether that's a human ecosystem or an environmental ecosystem.
and when so like if we look back at your Satoshi interaction, which is of course
Yeah.
fascinating in retrospect, um, like these kind of let's say political dimension of it, did I mean how like what do you recollect from interaction with Satoshi? Did he try to convince you on the technical end,
No,
or was
no,
he was
no,
he
no, no.
referring to stuff
Unfortunately,
on
not.
your yeah? So, but because
Mm,
he, like the first couple of code releases, I think it was in February, around February and March, right? He kind of, it looks to me like he simultaneously posted that the next, whatever, upgrade of Bitcoin would be available. He also posted it on the forum, on your P2P
yeah.
Foundation, like exchange. And he had a couple of reactions, but nobody really fully engaged. There was a couple of, messages, and somebody I think posted something that he has seen some similar kind of like currency project and so on. There were a couple of them around, but not to the sophistication of Bitcoin. And
Yeah,
so
I think
like
the
like
idea that it could, his belief that this was an alternative to the fiat system is not something that immediately convinced everybody, right? I mean, even the most enthusiastic people in the very beginning would have thought this is just something that comes on top of it, right? Just another alternative. Not, the idea that this could be like, uh, a sign from a future that is beyond the nation state and beyond fiat currencies, that took a while to sink in. And once it sinked in, then it created this libertarian enthusiasm. And and being more on the other side of the political divide at that time, that was disturbing to me. Like I actually quit the Ning because I thought, there's too many libertarians now. And it's of course, everybody has a right to his opinion, but we were flooded by libertarian members, right, who believe in absolutely free markets and no state, and no need for any social structures or policies, and so for me that was like not what I was looking for.
and so you said like Satoshi. So in addition to these posts on the forum, you were approached by him. What did you say, like three times? So was that just an immediate follow-up of his
No, no,
initial posting?
the second time was when he connected to me, when this Japanese guy was identified as being Satoshi,
Okay,
and he
this
wrote me a
this
very short email saying, "This is not me. I'm not that guy." Something like that, right? I don't
did you
recall.
forward that, or you just kept it for yourself? Like
I don't
because
think
there
I
was
did
quite a
anything with it.
frenzy in the
No,
media, right?
yeah, I'm sorry, but I didn't think that was so important. I wasn't obsessed with like who is Satoshi,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I just had other concerns. And so I found it interesting, but it's not something that kept me awake. I said, okay. And it did seem to me, like intuitively when I saw a Japanese guy, no, that's not a profile. This is like ridiculous. So I was happy to get it. And it confirmed my intuition that this was like a sideshow. Uh, it wasn't really very likely.
And then the third one.
Yeah, the third one was even shorter. Is simply promised like I'm gonna contact you soon, and that never happened. And by that time, I got reactions already from people saying it's not him. His email has been hacked. And since then, I get like maybe once a month, I get emails from people who say I am Satoshi. They know my name, and I get all kinds of crank emails about people pretending
But
to
they
be
were
Satoshi.
like the three emails you were referring to were all from one of these Satoshi addresses that he used in the
Yeah, I
in
think
the
it
in the
was the
very early days.
same, but people claimed that they didn't claim that for the second one, but they claimed it for the third one. That yeah, he's this is not him. His email has been hacked. You can't trust his messages. And I don't know. I'm not technical, so
Yeah.
I
Look,
didn't judge anything of.
there's probably no final verdict on whether it's genuine or not. But I was thinking, like, let's say if there was somebody who had somehow hacked or taken possession of these emails, you would think like they would have used it
Yeah.
much more, right? I mean, like
Yeah. Yeah.
let's say if you were to whatever do some good or bad, if you have these email
Mm,
addresses, right? I mean, if you send with if you control such an account and you
mm,
made like by having it whatever somewhat taken into your possession maybe illegally or just claimed the very account which might sometimes just they fade out essentially. They have an expiry date. If you don't
mm,
use certain accounts, they send you an email. Look, uh, if you don't do anything with it, we're gonna take it away from you or so, and then
mm.
somebody else might be able to claim it depending on the policy of the domain owner. But but then you think like, okay, they would have done more with it, right? I mean, they would have
Yeah.
maybe tried to manipulate you or sent you long messages to whatever, make you go to the press or do something with it, right? I mean, you would think that these people would do more with it than just
Yeah.
like little short
So I
mail.
personally think it's genuine, precisely for the same reason, because it was so short. And, I'm very open to the idea that he died, that person is no longer alive. I'm very open to that. Um,
And we
uh,
simply don't know. I mean, I don't
yeah.
think so, but I don't think nobody knows, right? It's just
Yeah.
like that mystery that is
Yeah,
puzzling
that
and all
helps
this.
for the mythologizing of of the
Yeah.
person. Uh,
And did you have okay, it was very short messages, but what was your kind of like sometimes you get emails from people, right, that don't you don't never met in person or so want something from you or so, and then you create some, or at least I do that, that I create maybe like a picture, like even though it's not illegal to
yeah,
do that from
I
messages, but did you have the impression he was from Japan, which the name would
no,
have suggested, right? Like in terms of the
no,
English
no.
and so on.
I always thought it was a pseudo. And okay, again, I wasn't focused completely on this, but I remember reading articles, with semantic analysis and stuff, and so I thought, no, no, this is definitely not a Japanese guy. This is just a name, that he
Did he
chose.
did he try to? I mean, like I think anybody he would have sent something in these early days to, right, would have probably not taken it super serious. I mean, if you look at it, the big guys, right, who were active in the field, except for Adam Back and then Hal Finney, who came in by himself, the others pretty much ignored it, right? There were a couple of big shots who had done some significant, let's say, precursors of it or essential ingredients. And I was always struck that he, at least as far as we know, he didn't reach out to them, right? So
Yeah.
if you study the history, right, and you think like you were Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008, 2009, right? I mean, one thing you wanted to do is probably spread the news and get essentially key impact people involved,
Mm,
right? And that was always striking me that except for Adam Back was the only one directly contacted. And then Adam Back pointed him to Wei Dai, who was also one of the guys who created somewhat a precursor, but he left out a lot of people that if you study
yeah.
the history, you would have approached, right? And then he approached you, right? That's what I find very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's a mystery to me as well, but I think for me it indicates that he was, I mean, for sure he was a technical person, and I think he probably was somewhat autistic, as some people in this field are. But I think the fact that he connected with me, I'm pretty sure he was clever enough and smart enough to know that we were different, right? So for me, that indicates that he had some ideas about social change and the transformative impact of it, potentially that he felt some kinship with what I was doing.
but you never really like I think maybe referring to what we like alluded to earlier. So, but he do you think had the impression that he would get some technical feedback from maybe not only you but your community? Because he posted the code, right? The source code. I mean, the
I
source
think he
code
did,
is
and he
some,
probably was very disappointed in me and maybe some others that, that this was not the case because this, P2P Foundation at that time did not attract technical people. We didn't. And so certainly in the beginning when he posted it, the kind of people who were on the Ning forum wouldn't have been technical people. But the libertarian and technical people came later on, right? And then it kind of exploded, but that was like months after. So I think when he sent it to me and to the forum, might have been disappointed that
but
it
was there
didn't.
any, so he essentially, as my records show that essentially that was pretty much for a month that he sequentially posted code upgrades. I
Right.
mean, he sent some explanation. I think that was very similar to what he sent on, on the code repository and on the mailing list and so on, the explanations. But um, was there any after he left, right? Was the Bitcoin thing anything that still resonated on the forum, or was it kind of dead?
Yeah, yeah,
That was
but
one
not
of
by the kind of people that I was associated with. So these were new people who came to our forum, and they were, mostly libertarians, and they were very idealistic about Bitcoin, and that it would solve all the issues, that it would obliterate the nation state, and that the fiat currencies would collapse. So so there was this ideological component to it, right? Which of course people have the right to think like that, and but it just wasn't my thing. So I didn't share those ideas. I still think Bitcoin is very important, transformative. But I'm not kind of like taking the whole libertarian ideology around it as the final truth. So that's and
but
so
what
in that case, and so
if
I retreated actually a bit from the whole thing because I, if you're moderator of of these forums, you have to approve candidates, right? So you have like 50, 60 a day every day. Like, no, I don't have time for this. So I kind of left it on its own. And then other people like Sepp Hasselberger and others, they continue to be on it and deal with these people, but I didn't. I moved away from Ning
but if
precisely
you
because of that reason.
but if you take back time now and put yourself into your mindset, let's say beginning of 2009,
Yeah.
before you're kind of switched, um, where would you see the overlap now between the Bitcoin spirit and where would that have slotted in to the ideology that was essentially the mindset of the people joining
Yeah,
the
yeah.
P2P Foundation at the time?
So
Where do you think
I
this?
think the difference is that libertarians, they think peer to peer, but only on technology and markets, right?
Yeah.
And I think peer-to-peer in terms of social relationships. So in terms of the capacity of people to organize translocally around projects, not technology, not money, but around like now we can do things together
Can you
translocally,
give an
right?
example for such projects?
Well, for example, let's say you do permaculture, right? So you have your feet in the mud, you're working with people in the neighborhood, trying to regenerate the soil and stuff like that, right? But all the learning happens on the net. So and that's what I call cosmolocal. If it's heavy, it's local. If it's light, it's global and shared. So it's a combination of, let's say, distributed making and distributed manufacturing, relocalizing, because we spend 3 times as much in the world on transport and on making. And it's not sustainable in the long term. We don't have enough resources if everybody starts doing that. So we need to rethink the way that we produce. And I think we need to localize, but at the same time, infuse that locality with smartness from the digital, right? So it's not local like let's get back to the land like they did in the 70s. I'm thinking distributed manufacturing. I'm thinking Arduino. I'm thinking, high knowledge intensity in the local. And then you do that by being connected with people in the whole world. So the market plays a role, but it's not really about the market itself. It's about intellectual cooperation, technical cooperation, scientific cooperation, and communities being formed locally, to do basically to ensure that they have food and energy in times which I believe will be very disruptive in the next few years. And I think, we can see it right now that this is, so think about like you have a period where you have the norm and only little fluctuations. Now we have the norm and we have these enormous fluctuations, like Trump with his tariffs, and it's disturbing all the supply chains in the whole world. And so now you have to think like, wow, like how do I deal with risk? How do I de-risk my supply chain? And a good answer to that, in my view, is, well, we have to make it more local. We can't just rely on things coming from China or the Philippines or if you're in Europe,
but like for
right? So
example,
so as you understand, this is not just like because a lot of libertarians, and I'm close to them now. Web3 people, it's about escaping collapse. It's about, okay, if Portugal collapses, let's go to Italy, let's go to Spain, let's go to Thailand, and we have this money that we can move around. But in the meantime, the Earth is not going well. So that's my critique on this attitude that uses Bitcoin as an escape mechanism, right? I don't agree with that attitude. I think we have to take care of the planet and especially the place where we are. Like we can't just think, oh, this let's escape this place and then go somewhere else. At some point, there's no place left where you can go.
yeah,
So
I just
we
wondering
need to. So
like
it's
where,
I'm on the region side, right? Not on the degen side. I'm on the region side of that community dynamic.
but I mean, like what I find astonishing with Satoshi that he actually wasn't that political, at least not as Satoshi Nakamoto, right? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't really have found much of what you just explained
No.
in things he was trying to promote. Like he, for example, he never really fully implemented it, but there was like like a little bit um, of a facility in the code, for example, for doing something like eBay, right? Like a
Mm.
peer-to-peer marketplace, if you will. So if you have something, and somebody else wants it, and a direct exchange doesn't work because the other one doesn't want what you're offering, then the Bitcoin could be like the currency or the value that you exchange for it, like in ancient times, before they had
Yeah. Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
then that was a good idea to have like a voucher, right? Like so I have something you want, but you don't have anything I want, but I give you a voucher, say Bitcoin, so you can go
Right.
somewhere else to trade it. I mean, that would be for me the only, at least discernible, like from his messages, overlap between what you have with the P2P Foundation and that ideology at the time
Yeah, yeah.
and the
I
spirit
don't claim
that
he was thinking the same, but I do think that he was well aware of the capacity of Bitcoin to transform, like the nation state logic, right? That translocal global aspect. I think he was very aware of that because this is not a money that is controlled or produced by nation states. This is a money that is produced globally by a community that trusts the protocol through which the money is made. Right. So I think he was aware of that, beyond the
yeah
technical. And in that sense, he might have felt a certain kinship, not a full kinship, but a certain kinship with the P2P Foundation because we were also aware of these sociological, anthropological effects. And I have to tell you, the P2P Foundation from the very beginning was a pluralistic community, right? So I have my ideas, but we have people with more libertarian leanings and people with more this leanings. We together, what unites is a belief in this peer-to-peer
How
logic
did your
and digital commons. That's what unites us. But we are not like a unified political group.
when did you actually start it? I mean, you did reserve that Ning domain there for the P2P Foundation. You are the originator of that, or how, when, and
Um,
how did
I
that
I
all
think
evolve?
I think I asked Sepp Hasselberger to do
Hmm.
this. We were talking together, and I said, isn't there anything that is integrative where you can do this and this and this at the same time? And I think he told me, oh, Ning can do that, and then he opened Ning, and then I joined. But I think Sepp Hasselberg was the one. And there's another person, I'm trying to remember his name. He's like an English guy, Joseph. Um, yeah, I forgot his name, but he was also involved in the setting up of the forum. So that wasn't me.
And
But
when
they,
was
in
that
a way,
roughly?
they did it.
What
But they did
year?
it. Say that again.
What year roughly? What was
That would have been a year
or
or two before, Satoshi joined because I only started with the wiki in December or November 2005. So that's like the real creation of the P2P Foundation. And then I started getting invited in places, people started working with me. Eventually in 2018, we had 10 full-time people working on the P2P Foundation.
And what would be interesting to learn is, you know, I mean, there were a lot of people like, let's say myself, right? I've been programming for decades, but if he had approached me, I didn't do anything in cryptography, Richard, right? I wouldn't have understood technically what he's talking about, and I'm probably, I'm not a as I said, I'm not a cryptographer, but I would be much more versed in computing than the average human being, right? I
Mm.
programmed part of my, postgraduate stuff and so on in the same programming language that Bitcoin is programmed in. But I mean, the interesting thing is if Satoshi had that big vision, right, to make this for whatever motivation, for whatever objective, like maybe the P2P spirit, or I mean your P2P Foundation spirit, or to cancel essentially the money printing of governments and so on, at some stage you have to have the mindset to take it from what is a rather small community, right? I mean, Bitcoin, I mean, if you had the full vision for it, you would need to have others than computer nerds to
Mm.
adopt it, because then it doesn't make sense, right? If you have a credit card and
Right.
it's only accepted by one shop, then nobody will use it because you kind of want to go and have it everywhere. So the same with Bitcoin, right? If only like the people who were initially on these specialized uh, floor, right? I think there were maybe 100 or 1,000 people or something like that, but not millions or billions of people. And if if that had only stayed in that community of, let's say, a few thousand people, or a few 10,000, let it be, then the thing could have never taken off, right? So
Mm.
for me, the approach to Yuval and the P2P Foundation might have been his attempt to spread it out. But on the other hand, he didn't want that to go too fast. He also said that at some stage because he considered it like more like a beta version, right? So he wanted to have a
Right.
small community where nothing, he was aware that there might have been some bugs in the program and it needs some upgrades and so on, So you were maybe like a little bit like a guinea pig in the greater, in the, let's say, in the people that are not technical specialists, and see whether they would have any appetite for it. But as far as I understand, he didn't make like, I mean, like when he explained Bitcoin on the P2P forum, the it seemed to me like that wouldn't have made sense to people, and especially like that he posted the source code, as I said before, you cannot expect that people from a non-cryptographer, non-internet distributed, decentralized computing background and so on would get all excited about it. Right? It
Right.
was kind of too early for your community, right? You would like to have had an app essentially that where you don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
compile the source code and know about libraries and compiler switches and all that, right? That's kind of so it might have been just a first foray into the community at large, right? Where you
Yeah,
thought,
I
okay,
think that's a good assessment. Yeah, yeah. And he wasn't pushing, right? So I think that's also indicative. He wasn't pushing. He was like just inviting to have some attention, but he wasn't trying to convince me or anybody. He was just doing his thing and just putting it out there and see what happens. I
yeah,
think,
it,
just like this thing.
but I mean, it's just like, was it, yeah, so that's kind of like, why in the world, right? Did he, as far as we know, again, only pick you guys, right? Let's say you were Satoshi Nakamoto, right? You want to, let's say it was an attempt to go beyond the typical clientele of the cryptography mailing list and the cypherpunks and so on, there would have been so many options. And was he, I mean, I always wondered, I looked at the pages that are still up, right? And then I looked at, he must have been maybe on that forum, and you have a list of forum members that is somewhat, and then you try to find someone, but of course it's pretty much impossible because the Satoshi Nakamoto, the person behind the pseudonym, I mean, the pseudonym, his Satoshi might have been just a artificial figure, right? So all this stylometry and psychological profiling and so on might not work because he might have just played a certain role, right? Like an actor as
Right.
Satoshi Nakamoto online than he would have been in his real life. So it's pretty much futile to find like a person who might have been on the forum, which you would think as that was the only place he actually contacted outside the usual suspects. That's pretty much quite astonishing. Is there anything you but I guess of your interactions, we were in touch before this interview, like for actually a year or two. So you don't have any record of these emails. You kind of lost them at some stage with that Satoshi sent to you,
Um,
or
yeah, at some point, I didn't want to pay for the Google extension, and I know I deleted a lot. Now, maybe an expert could find them. I don't know.
you wouldn't have them. But
Um,
they were sent from the you you said they were sent from the Satoshi emails that were commonly associated to have been in
yeah,
his
yeah.
possession
All
at the
all
time.
all three of them, but I do remember then by the third time, I was talking to some people about it, that they said, no, this has been hacked. You can't trust it. Uh, but yeah, so definitely it was the regular email that you would see not in some other place that he used. Yeah.
I mean, usually these opinions are quite controversial, right? You usually find the same number of experts saying they were genuine as they were hacked
Yeah.
emails, and we don't know. So I think the later ones are probably hacked, and the earlier ones are the closer they
Yeah.
are to the side to the time when or to the
Yeah,
period when
I
he
I tend
was
to think what you said before. If they were hacked, then why being so simple? Like I'm gonna contact you again, or I'm not this man. So why be so simple if they're hacked?
yeah, you would use it
if you hack them,
whatever,
you hack them for a reason.
yeah, even for criminal stuff or so, he could
Yeah,
have done some damage because if he sent some emails from this account, he would have a sufficient number of people taking them serious.
yeah,
Those people who are maybe not experts and want to believe
yeah.
that he's still alive and sending messages. So yeah, but we don't know. Okay, you have anything you want to add still? Anything you experienced in that context that we haven't talked
Well,
about? Or
maybe just a personal experience. It's my bad karma with Bitcoin. So, the first time Satoshi offered me some Bitcoins and I didn't reply to that part of his little email. And the second time we were collecting donations at the P2P Foundation, and we had, I can't remember the year, but it was just before Mount Gox
like
collapsed.
2013 or something
We
like
had
that?
the equivalent of $300,000 back then, and that was we lost that, and we never managed to get it back.
You mean
So
with,
I
but
have
that doesn't have to do anything with Bitcoin, or that was a
no,
different.
no. It's just that we lost our Bitcoin. I'd refused the Bitcoin first, and then we lost the second time the Bitcoin I had.
Oh,
I'm just
but
saying
that
I have
Bitcoin, what you purchased it, or with the
no, no, no.
foundation,
These
or
were donations for the P2P Foundation.
oh, just but not from Satoshi, just you had a
No, no,
Bitcoin
no, no,
account
no.
and
From
then
from various people. I never checked, but small donors, medium donors. Over time, they had accumulated to have a value of
so
$300,000.
you essentially gave a Bitcoin address that was controlled by the
Exactly.
P2P Foundation, and that
Yeah,
was lost then
exactly.
in Mt. Gox.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the day before it was stolen on Mount Gox, I asked my friend who was managing the legal aspects of the P2P Foundation in Amsterdam at the time, and he said, shouldn't we sell some? I said, no, 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 it's going up. Let's keep them, and now we lost everything. So this is the tragedy of Michel Bauwens and Bitcoin. I'm not meant to be rich with Bitcoin. It's a joke, but
But
it's
there
really
were others, like I
it,
talked to people and they had like I think like 5,000 Bitcoin, and they said, okay, it's probably going to go down now. Now we're talking about 10 years ago or so, right?
yeah,
So he had like I don't remember, let's say 1,000 Bitcoin, whether it was 500 or 5,000 doesn't
yeah,
really,
yeah.
it would be a lot of money today, both. And he said like he bought a PlayStation for it.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like there were a lot of like, or I talked to people
Right.
who bought
Yeah, yeah. No,
their
it's a
coffee
bit
for
of a
five
joke,
Bitcoin.
but
So you're
yeah,
not the
yeah.
only one who lost it or who spent it or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
on stuff that wasn't really worth as much as they would have now
But
if they
yeah,
would get it.
yeah. Anyway, I want to thank you for, your due diligence, and how you really do the research, like very concrete, practical, detailed, fact-based. It's great that somebody does that.
Thank you very much for your time and all the best in settling back into Thailand again and hopefully that was the last time this unfortunate
I hope
thing
so too. Yeah,
happened
yeah.
to you.
Thanks
Okay.
you so much,
Thanks so much,
Jens.
Michelle.
It's great to talk to you. All right.
Thank you. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.